First of all, could you tell our audience your name?
Edward Newman,
And when were you born, Ed?
August the 22nd, 1925.
Where did you grow up?
Various places. St. Louis was my younger years to 11 years old. And then I've been to Chicago, Detroit, Memphis, Tennessee. I was born, and West Texas. I went to school out in the high plains, in a little place called La Mesa, Texas. And I graduated from grade school there, or from high school there.
How would you describe your home life?
Well, up to 11 years old was great. And after that, I didn't have much. At 14 years old, I left the home in Arkansas that they had placed me with one of my mother's sisters. My mother died when I was 11, and that's when my home life was disrupted. And my sisters went, 4 sisters, went to different aunts, and me and my brother went and lived with my grandparents.
And where was that?
Well, it started out in Arkansas, and then my grandfather, at about the same time that we moved in with them, moved to Texas, at La Mesa, Texas.
So I remember you describing to me that at one time you began life as a baker.
That's correct. I was born in a bakery.
And was that your father?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So he was a baker by trade?
Yes,
and
he
then
was.
You learned the trade as you grew
Through
up
him, that's
with
right.
him.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was might say at 12 years old, I was a baker, really. I knew how to do practically everything in the bake shop.
And you mean like an industrial baker?
Yes.
Like
yeah, well,
baking.
retail bakeries, what
Okay.
it was. And wholesale as well. He had 10 or 12 trucks to deliver.
And where was this?
St. Louis.
Okay.
And that was while my mother was alive. And she controlled him. He was a drunk, by the way. And when she died, why, he went off the deep end and spent a couple $100,000. And I don't know where he died because he just wandered across the country. He was in the Navy, and he got a dishonorable discharge, not dishonorable, bad conduct discharge from the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see much of him. Occasionally I'd hear from him wanting money.
So you told me that you wound up in Chicago.
Right, correct.
And what did you do in Chicago?
Worked in a bakery. Yeah, I had relatives that were in the family, and lots of them that were in the bakery business.
And this was in the late 30s?
Yeah, let me think now.
So before the war?
Yeah, before the war, yes. Mm-hmm. And I was in Chicago I was in Detroit when they bombed Pearl Harbor, and my brother was in Chicago, and so I left Detroit and went to Chicago, and my brother went into the Air Force at that time. and he went to Germany right away.
And what was his job
He
in
was
the
a
Air
ball
Force?
turret gunner on the B-17. Put 50 missions over Germany. 225 on a 225 mission hitches. You do 25 missions and you got to come home. But they were short of ball turret gunners, and they asked him to stay and help train some because you had to be under 140 or 50 pounds to get in that ball turret. And he was the size of me, 135, 40. And so after his first 25 missions, he was getting ready to come home, and they asked him to stay and help train some ball turret gunners they were short of. And he said okay, and he stayed, and they'd be short a man on a flight, and they had asked him to take a flight, and he'd go, and he'd go, and he'd go, and then finally he got assigned to another squadron, and he done 25 more.
And how did his service end?
He finished his second tour and came home.
Okay.
At that time, they asked him to stay and help train, and he said, well, are you going to ask me to fly again? And they said, well, that'd be up to your colonel. And he says, I want to go home.
And so then you wound up in the Navy. Can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about how you wound up in the Navy?
Well, my dad had been in the Navy, and so I don't know. I thought about the boys marching over there, and I'd seen movies and stuff, early stuff about the fighting around, and I decided that I wanted to be in the Navy. I'd rather. And I had never been on a ship, by the way, and the only boat that I remember back in them days, I had one of those 5-man life rafts that I'd go fishing with. That was pre-Navy. I was 16, 17 years old.
So after the war broke out, you wound up
Yeah, I
joining the
volunteered.
Navy?
I tried to get in while I was 16. I lied, told them I was 17. But they said have my parents sign the enlistment thing. I took it home and forged my father's name on it, but they didn't buy that, and so I had to wait till I was 17 to get in. And I volunteered for the draft to get in. That's the only way. At 17, you could volunteer and get in without your parents' signature, but I didn't have any parents, so that's the only way I could get in.
So where did you go after you joined the Navy?
First thing I did, I went to boot camp, of course, and that was in Farragut, Idaho. Camp, let's see, don't remember, I can't call the name of that. I've got dementia, and I remember the camp I was in, Camp Ward, and anyway, I finished my boot camp, and they sent me to Seattle at a Marine air base. I can't call the name of that right off. Anyway, it was a Marine air base, and I went to Cooks and Baker School there.
So they knew you were a baker, and
Yeah, well,
they were.
they asked me what I did, and I told them I was a baker, and they decided that I'd be a good baker, so they sent me to Cooks and Baker School. Well, I graduated at the first of the class because I knew it all, and I had the advantage of the other guys, and so I graduated head of the class. I also got a stripe, a third class baker stripe, which went on your arm, which made me actually pretty important person on board ship when you're on there with 1,000 people, and there's probably about 100 men on board that had stripes, and that the aircraft carrier had 800 boots on it when we went to sea, and 1,000, roughly 1,000, ran the ship. That's including officers, and then we have another 800 or 900 on board that were what we call flight. Let's see. I can't say the word.
Officers?
No, I'm talking about the boys that kept the airplanes going.
Okay.
The mechanics and
Right.
plane captains and everybody. There was just about as many of them as there was sailors, and they were flight crew on ship. They were separate, really. They weren't ship's company, and we had two chow lines. One fed Airedales, that's what they were, and Airedales went through one line, and the ship's crew went through the other line. And, but they were eating the same food. They on the one side of the ship was Airedales, and the other side was crew.
So you were placed on an aircraft carrier
That's correct.
at Seattle.
Yes.
And what was the name of that aircraft carrier?
USS Steamer Bay, CVE 87. And that 87 designated the number that they had built of those carriers when I went in. That's 87 aircraft carriers.
And those were escort carriers.
Escort carriers, correct. Carried 26 fighter planes. Not fighters, but fighters and torpedo bombers.
What were the types of aircraft that they
Well, we had on Wildcats, which was a little inferior to the Zero, by the way, and the difference in our Navy planes and the Japanese planes was that the Japanese didn't put armor in those Zeros. They were a lot lighter than, say, the F-4F, which was an early fighter. And but anyway, that's what we had. And Zero could outperform it. And the only way our boys survived that was being a superior pilot. We had some good pilots.
So you went to the Pacific Theater.
Pacific, that's correct.
And do you recall what year you deployed to the Pacific?
Yeah, that would have been 1944. That's right, 44. That's when, in fact, I was in the, I remember a date, 4, 4, and 44. they said that number will never come up again in our lifetime.
So, what was it like being a ship's baker?
Well, I was popular because now the cooks weren't as popular because the guys, uh, uh, the I guess the American tradition was to grap about the food, and but the Navy fed good because we carried some survivors from the South Pacific off some of the islands, and we'd get wound up with them to carry them back out of the fighting zone as we retired to get more planes or a new squadron, and those boys, they just exclaimed how good the food was. There was a lot of Marines and Army boys, but we picked up off of Taiwan and I can't call all the islands over there that they took, and we were a part of.
What types of baked goods did you all produce?
Everything. And they come up with, one time the chief put donuts on the menu. Well, we didn't have the equipment it took to make donuts. And so the chief baker told the chief of both departments, of the bakery and the baker and the cook department, who was boss of the whole thing, and they told him we couldn't make donuts to change the menu. And I told him, I said, I can make donuts. And I said, I'll get some stuff, but I said, I can make donuts. So I went about gathering up the equipment. It took a cutter, a rolling pin, and that was the two main tools to make donuts. One to chop out a donut, and a big rolling pin to roll the dough.
So, how many just loaves of bread did you have to bake per day?
We'd make, if I remember correctly, that oven held 88 loaves, and we made 3 runs of bread every day. And sometimes 4. We'd have to work nights sometime to make enough bread to keep the crew. Because when we went to general quarters, if we was there sometimes 2 or maybe 3 days without securing from general quarters, we didn't get to light the ovens. And those were oil burning ovens. They burned the fuel oil, I guess, the same oil that the engines ran on. And but we couldn't light them during if you were in general quarters.
Speaking of general quarters, what was your job during general quarters?
Well, the first year, I was on a 20 millimeter. And later on, I got my second strike, and I ran the crew in the bake shop, which I did from the start with my first strike. But I got another rating, and they took me off of the flight crew. I mean, my battle station, instead of being a 20 millimeter, was the bake shop. And in the bake shop, what we did, we would put about 200 or 300 loaves of bread in the deep freeze. And we would, of course, we couldn't light the oven, so we would have to pull that frozen bread out and thaw it out and run it through the slicer and serve it. And after you freeze bread, take it out, and it's not really good, but it was bread.
Can you describe some of the specialty items that the bake shop produced?
Well, the guys liked chocolate cake. They liked apple pie. And, or just about anything we made, they liked. But, boy, they loved and donuts. You couldn't make enough donuts. I told the chief, I says, I'm going to burn them guys out. I said, I'm going to make donuts running out their ears. But I couldn't fill them. I couldn't stop feeding them 2,000 people. I couldn't make enough donuts to make them slow down. They eat them. They love them donuts.
I also remember you describing to me that you would make little like care packages of baked goods for the pilots.
That's correct. Flight rations. Now this is not something that it's in the book. It's just something we did for the pilots. They go up on routine sub patrol. In other words, we kept planes in the air all the time, and they'd go up for 2 hours, and I did go up on a couple of 3 occasions on the TBM behind the pilot in the gutter spot, and when we weren't in a forward zone, and that was just on sub patrol.
So what was in these flight ration?
All cookies, mostly cookies, and if we had donuts, then there'd be donuts in there. But mostly cookies, or a little piece of cake or something was all right too, but it had to be dry food that you could put in a wrap up for the pilots. And they enjoyed that snack on a 2-hour sub patrol. But on combat, they didn't get anything.
You also told me about a special dish that you made for some fellows from New York.
Oh, pizza, was it? Yeah. That's the first I ever heard of pizza. Yeah, well, I lived in Chicago, and I lived in an Italian neighborhood, but I don't remember pizza. But there, the main thing that I ate in Chicago was spaghetti and meat sauce or spaghetti and meatballs. I ate a lot of that, and but I don't remember pizza. I just don't remember it, and so. But they told me how to make it, and an old Italian guy, I say old, he was maybe a little older than me, Italian, he was typical Italian, and he told me how to make it. Just take bread dough and roll it out and put it in a sheet pan and put tomatoes, onions, and some ground meat on it, and that's the way I made it.
Some cheese.
And some cheese, yeah, that's the main ingredient is cheese.
So that was the first time you'd ever made pizza.
That's correct. In fact, I just don't remember a pizza before that. I just don't remember it.
So then at one time you were actually in a forward area and in combat. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, at the first of my career over there, It was in the islands, and I did have a gun station, 20 millimeter gunner, and I was senior man, senior in on the stripes, not in years maybe, and on a 20 millimeter, but I wear glasses, and the 20 millimeter kind of jiggled you around, and your glasses would jiggle, and as your glasses jiggle, and you got prescription, that moves the reticle in the sight on your gun. So I turned the shooting of the gun, which you're strapped to it like a big strap comes around your back and it snaps onto the gun. And in fact, you could lay down and shoot straight up with that strap on you. And anyway, I turned the shooting over to another member of the flight crew of our squadron there. And see, we had a gunner, loader, a spotter. Be 5 men to a 20 millimeter, and I turned the actual firing of the gun when I did fire at one kamikaze coming in on that 20 when I was on the 20 millimeter, and I was just firing the gun and sighting over the sight and firing with the tracers. And it looked like the bullets would go into that airplane, but not necessarily so. And they told me that wasn't good. Said you're going to have to fire through that bung 14 is what the name of that sight was. So you got to fire through that bung 14 because it takes into consideration the trajectory of the airplane that's coming at you, whether he's coming from an angle or straight in or straight down or whatever, and it takes up the lag of the bullet. Anyway, and so I turned the firing of the gun over to another boy who was pretty good when we took practice at Pearl Harbor. When we went through Pearl Harbor, they sent airplanes with us with a trailer behind them. It was a big tube of air that trailed the airplane, and we'd fire at that trailer. And I looked like I'm riddling that bag, but I put very few bullets in that. So I told him, that another man that I knew that he was a better shooter than I was. When we got in the forward zone, I love shooting the gun, but I loved somebody that could hit one of them airplanes better.
So at one point, then, I believe it was the Battle of the Philippine Sea.
That's one of them, yes. That was the last one that I was in, the Battle of the Philippine Sea, yes. That's where we lost a bunch of our, I say a bunch, it was 3 out of our squadron, 3, I think, 1 or 2 destroyers and 1 DE, which there's a book about them, by the way, called The Last of the Tin Can Sailors. And did you get one of those books?
Yes, sir. Yes.
So I'm interested.
By James Hornfisher.
Yeah, I don't remember who mine was written by, but I got it in there.
Last Stand of the Tin Can Sailors.
Yes, it sure was.
So you were in one of those taffy groups.
That's right. I don't remember if we stayed like Taffy 1, Taffy 2, and Taffy 3. There was 3 squadrons. And so I don't remember. Well, we kind of, we'd float around, really. There was, like I said, 6 of those, six, 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 5, 6 in a group, I believe, 5 or 6 in a circle. And then there'd be 6 groups. That's the way we went to sea, 2 miles apart, everybody.
So in one of those battles, you witnessed the USS Omni Bay, which was also
Sunk.
an escort carrier.
Yes, that's right. It was part of one of the 6 of our group of carriers.
And
yes.
how was it
It
sunk?
was hit with a kamikaze plane. Went right down through the elevator was down at the time that he hit it, and he went in the elevator, and it became a blazing inferno. They abandoned ship. Very few men died. A couple, 200 or 300. I think about 600 sailors were survival off of that. And at night, that carrier was burning. We could see it 30 miles away, and they sent a destroyer back there to put a torpedo in it and sink it.
So near the end of the war, what were your thoughts on how long the war was going to last and how long you thought you would be involved in it?
Well, maybe my thinking wasn't too straight at that time about the time. When I got, we were at Okinawa when 6 of us got transferred to the States. One of them being our captain, who was Captain Stedman Teller. And there were 6 of us that were picked to go back to the States and train people. At that time, we were still fighting the war. And it was in 1945, I guess, yes. And we were, but there was only 6 they picked from our ship to come back and do some training, and my captain was one of us. And Captain Stedman Teller, time we got to the States and took our 30-day leaves and got back, they dropped the atomic bomb. In fact, when I had served my time, my liberty, I'd come home for 30 days, and or 20 days, I don't remember. But anyway, when I went back to San Francisco, where I was to report back in, or Los Angeles, I'm not sure which, Frisco, I believe. I was assigned to a LST, which is a landing ship with the bow doors that drop down and open up. And it was rigged below deck where the tanks used to be. And it was rigged with wooden stalls. And it was rigged to carry ammo. And they'd load that thing up and it would go to sea. take that ammo over to one of the islands that was a base of operations and discharge it. And I seen one of them go up in the WWII, I believe it was. I seen it explode. That's the only time I ever saw a ship that just that close and just blow up to nothing. And when the explosion died down, the smoke died down, there wasn't nothing left. But anyway, and then when I was assigned to that LST and to go back to war, and then the atomic bomb was dropped, I kind of sighed a little relief but I did serve another year in the Navy on that LST. But we would just kind of shuffled around. We would take on, as destroyers and escorts would come in, we'd take off the torpedoes and ammo, and they'd go into Puget Columbia River. They went up to Portland, I believe it was, somewhere up in there that they stored those, put them in mothballs at the end of the war. And my carrier, the Steamer Bay, which I wasn't on it at that time, but it was sold in New Orleans for scrap. And I was a plank owner, which I still have the paperwork on it, but the Navy sent me a message at one time and said that the ship was being destroyed and that the flight deck of the aircraft carrier was wood. I guess they were probably oak plants. And so they said I could come get my plank if I wanted it. And which I would have liked to have it, but I wasn't able at that time to go to New Orleans to get it. So I never did get the actual ownership of the plank.
So could you summarize for our viewers your overall feeling about your service to your country during the war, and particularly in the Navy in the Pacific Theater?
Yeah, I can. I enjoyed my cruise. It was 3 years and 8 months and a few days, I believe, and just short of the 4-year hitch. And I really enjoyed it. I was a young man, and I just I did get married while I was on that LST after the war. I came home. I got a 20-day leave. I came home, got married, and went back and served out to. I had enough points to get out when the war was over. I had my 44 points, but they didn't have enough bakers, and they wouldn't let me out at that time, and so I another year in the Navy, but it wasn't bad other than the fact that I just got married and I wanted to go home with my wife.
You made donuts too well.
I guess so.
Well, Ed,
I've made 1 million donuts in my time, or several million maybe.
we want to thank you for your service,
Oh, gosh.
and especially for this interview on March the 19th, 2023.
Yeah.
As you are approaching your 99th birthday here in Waco, Texas, which is your home. And we hope you make it to 100 and beyond.
Yeah, I'm supposed to go for the 100. I don't feel like it right now, but I'm still walking, and that's a big asset is to be able to walk. Cause my wife spent a year in a wheelchair, and I took care of her. I don't want to be a wheelchair. I don't intend to be. So
I don't think you will.
I hope I don't. I just soon drop dead.
Right.
I don't think there's a better way to go.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to sign off
All
now.
right. You got a big message there.
Yep.